The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I was already awake, nursing my second cup of coffee and watching the snow fall outside my kitchen window in Toronto. My phone lit up with my brother's name, Glenn. We hadn't spoken in 3 weeks, not since our last tense visit to our mother's nursing home. "Douglas," he said. His voice carried a false solemnity that immediately put me on edge. "I have some difficult news." My stomach tightened. Mom passed away last night, peacefully in her sleep. I set my coffee mug down, my hands suddenly unsteady. "What? When?" I asked. "I was just planning to visit her today." "The funeral is Friday," he continued, cutting me off. His tone shifted, flat, almost businesslike. "I've already made the arrangements." Then came the part that didn't belong in a conversation about death. "Oh, and Douglas, about Mom's estate. The will is very clear. Everything goes to me. The house, the cottage in Muskoka, her investments, all of it." I didn't speak. "You get nothing," he added, "and don't even think about contesting it." Then he hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. My mother was gone, just like that. And Glenn's first priority hadn't been condolences or compassion, but making sure I knew I was cut out entirely. Not "I'm sorry," not "she went peacefully," just a warning. Something was very, very wrong. Let me back up. My name is Douglas Harrison. I'm 64 years old, a retired civil engineer who spent 4 decades designing infrastructure across Ontario. My wife, Catherine, passed away 3 years ago after a long battle with cancer. We had one daughter, Emma, 28 now, working as a marine biologist in Vancouver. After Catherine died, I threw myself into volunteering and spending time with my mother. She became my anchor through grief, my steady presence when everything else felt unmoored. My brother Glenn is 4 years younger, 58. We were close growing up, playing hockey in the driveway of our old house in North York. But adulthood changed that. Glenn became a real estate agent, married Patricia, and had 2 children. From the outside, everything looked fine, but over the years I noticed cracks. Glenn was always chasing the next big deal, always overextended. There were quiet conversations at family dinners about investments gone wrong, Patricia picking up double shifts as a nurse, money that never seemed to last. Our mother, Helen Harrison, was 85 and sharp as a tack for most of her life. A retired school teacher, she could recite poetry from memory and beat anyone at Scrabble without breaking a sweat. She lived independently in her Richmond Hill home until about 9 months ago, when Glenn convinced her she needed extra help. He suggested becoming her power of attorney just to manage bills and medical appointments. Mom hesitated, but Glenn was persuasive. He was her baby boy, after all. That's when everything changed. Within weeks of Glenn gaining POA, Mom was suddenly diagnosed with severe dementia. Glenn moved her into Maple Grove Care Center, insisting she could no longer live alone. When I visited, I was shocked. My vibrant, witty mother sat slumped in a chair, staring vacantly at the wall. She didn't recognize me. And in that moment, standing in that sterile room, I knew something was terribly wrong. She barely spoke. When she did, her words were confused, fragmented. "Is this really possible?" I had asked her doctor, Dr. James Whitmore. "She was fine 2 months ago." "Dementia can progress very rapidly in some cases," he replied smoothly. "At her age, cognitive decline can appear sudden." But it didn't sit right with me. I kept visiting Mom 3 times a week anyway, even when she didn't know who I was. I'd hold her hand and tell her about Emma, about the volunteer projects I was working on. Glenn visited too, but far less often, and when he did, he always seemed rushed, always checking his watch. Now, standing alone in my kitchen with Glenn's words still ringing in my ears, I finally saw what I'd been too blind to recognize. This wasn't grief. This was greed. I called Maple Grove Care Center immediately. "I'm calling about my mother, Helen Harrison," I said when someone finally answered. "I was just informed that she passed away last night." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison," the woman said carefully, but I don't have any record of that. Let me check her room. My heart began to pound. A few minutes later, she returned. Sir, your mother is fine. She's having breakfast right now. Is there some confusion? I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. Can you do me a favor? I said quietly. Please don't tell anyone I called, especially not my brother. I hung up and immediately dialed my daughter. Emma answered on the third ring, her voice tight with concern. Dad, it's barely 7 in the morning there. What's wrong? Your uncle just told me Grandma died, I said. But she didn't. She's alive. Silence. Then, carefully, Dad, that's elder abuse. That's fraud. I know, I said, and I don't know exactly what he's planning, but I need to figure it out fast. He said the funeral is Friday. That's 3 days from now. After we hung up, I spent the morning making calls. First, I contacted Robert Chen, a lawyer I'd worked with years earlier on a construction contract dispute. After I explained everything, he didn't hesitate. Douglas, this is serious, he said. If your brother has power of attorney and is misrepresenting your mother's condition, or worse, misappropriating her assets, we're talking about potential criminal charges. But you'll need evidence, solid evidence. Next, I hired a private investigator. Sarah Mitchell arrived at my house that afternoon, a sharp woman in her mid-40s, gray streaking through her dark hair, a notebook already in hand. How long has your brother had power of attorney? She asked. 9 months, I said, right after Mom supposedly developed dementia. Before that, she was completely competent, volunteering at the library. Playing bridge twice a week. And then suddenly she couldn't remember her own name? I nodded. Sarah's expression hardened. I've seen cases like this. Give me 48 hours. I'll find out what's been happening with your mother's finances. That evening, I drove to Maple Grove unannounced. When I entered Mom's room, she was sitting in her usual chair by the window, watching the sky darken outside. Her gray hair had thinned, her face more lined than I remembered, but something about her seemed different tonight, less medicated, more present. Mom, I said softly, pulling up a chair beside her. She turned slowly. Those familiar brown eyes met mine. There was something there, recognition, or at least the beginning of it. It's me, I said gently. Douglas, your son. She blinked, her mouth moving as if she were trying to form a word, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. But then a nurse stepped in to check her vitals, and the moment was gone. I drove home through the falling snow, my thoughts spiraling. What was Glenn planning? A fake funeral to convince everyone Mom was dead? And then what? Quietly transfer her assets while no one questioned it? It sounded insane, and yet the more I thought about it, the more terrifyingly brilliant it seemed. Sarah called the next morning. Douglas, she said, you need to sit down. I lowered myself into a chair at the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear. Your brother has been very busy. Over the past 8 months, he's transferred approximately $280,000 from your mother's accounts into his own. My stomach dropped. He also sold her cottage in Muskoka to a numbered company. I'm still tracing ownership, but I strongly suspect he's behind it. And he's been using her credit cards regularly. I exhaled slowly, my hands clenched. And there's more, Sarah continued. The doctor who diagnosed your mother with dementia, Dr. James Whitmore, he went to university with your brother. They've been friends for over 30 years. I felt physically sick. So the dementia could be medication-induced, I said. If she's being overprescribed sedatives or antipsychotics, that would explain the sudden decline, the vacant behavior. Yes, Sarah replied, and if that's the case, we're talking about criminal charges, possibly attempted murder, but we have to prove it. She paused. I'm requesting her medical records, but that takes time. For now, go see your mother again. Document everything, and if you can, record conversations with your brother. Ontario is a one-party consent province. That afternoon, I was back at Maple Grove. I had my phone ready, prepared to record anything suspicious, but when I reached Mom's room, it was empty. A nurse I didn't recognize was changing the sheets. "Where's my mother?" I asked, panic rising. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," she said casually. "Your brother took her out for a drive. He said she needed some fresh air." My blood ran cold. "When?" "About an hour ago." I ran to the parking lot. Glenn's black Mercedes was gone. I called him, no answer. Again, nothing. 5 times, silence. 3 hours later, they returned. Glenn helped Mom out of the car, supporting her as she shuffled back inside. She looked exhausted, disoriented, barely upright. He spotted me waiting in the hallway. "Douglas," he said, irritation flickering across his face, "what are you doing here?" "You said Mom died yesterday," I replied evenly, "yet here she is." He actually laughed. "Oh, that," he said. "Sorry about the confusion. I meant to call you back. False alarm. She had a bad episode. You know how dementia is." "Where did you take her today?" "Just for a drive. She likes getting out." "Really?" I said, "because she looks like she can barely stand." "Back off, Douglas." His voice dropped, hardened. "I'm her power of attorney. I make decisions about her care, not you. If you want to challenge that, get a lawyer." He brushed past me, guiding Mom into her room. Through the doorway, I watched him settle her into her chair, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Then he left, without even looking at me. I was about to go when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello?" Silence. Then a whisper. Thin, shaky. A woman's voice. "Douglas?" "Yes?" My heart began to pound. "Who is this?" "Douglas, it's me." I pressed the phone hard against my ear. "Who?" "It's your mother." I froze. That couldn't be possible. Mom was right there in her room, and this call was coming from... I glanced at my phone. Blocked number. "Douglas, listen carefully," the voice whispered. "I don't have much time. I need you to come to my room tonight, late, after 10. Make sure Glenn isn't here." My heart hammered. "And Douglas," she added, "don't tell anyone about this call." The line went dead. I stood frozen in the parking lot, snow drifting down around me, staring at my phone like it had turned into something unrecognizable. That was impossible. Mom could barely string together 2 words. And yet, that voice, even strained and whispered, it sounded like her. Not the confused woman from the nursing home, but the sharp, clear-minded mother I'd known my entire life. I waited in my car until after 10 p.m., watching the nursing home. Glenn's Mercedes was long gone. The night shift had taken over, a skeleton crew. Using my key code, I slipped in through the side entrance and walked quickly to Mom's room. She was sitting up in bed, the lights dim. When I stepped inside, she turned to look at me, and I stopped cold. Her eyes were clear, focused, completely present. "Close the door," she said. Not the slurred mumble I'd heard for months, a normal voice, strong, calm. I shut the door, my hands shaking. "Mom, what?" "Sit down, sweetheart," she said gently. "We need to talk, and we don't have much time." I lowered myself into the chair, stunned. Are you okay? What's happening?" She smiled, actually smiled, the familiar, knowing smile from my childhood, the one she used to give when she caught Glenn and me sneaking cookies before dinner. "I'm fine, Douglas," she said. "I've been fine this whole time." My breath caught. "But the dementia, the diagnosis, I couldn't even recognize you." "Because I was pretending," she said softly. The room seemed to tilt. "Pretending?" She reached for my hand. Her grip was firm, steady, nothing like the weak, trembling hands I'd been holding for months. "Douglas, I'm 85 years old," she said. "I've been thinking a lot about mortality, about what happens when I'm gone, and I realized I needed to know something." She met my eyes. "I needed to know which of my sons would truly take care of me, not for money, not for inheritance, but because they loved me." My voice barely worked. "So, you faked dementia to test us?" "When Glenn suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity," she said. "I agreed, but I also consulted my own lawyer, someone Glenn doesn't know about." I stared at her. "I placed most of my assets into an irrevocable trust weeks before Glenn received POA," she continued. "The accounts he has access to, I left just enough to see what he'd do." My mind struggled to keep up. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Her expression softened, sadness flickering through her eyes. "Because I had to test both of you," she said. "I had to see who would visit me when I couldn't give anything back, who would hold my hand when I didn't even know their name." Her voice wavered. "And Douglas, you came 3 times a week. You sat with me, you talked to me, even when I acted like I didn't know who you were." Tears streamed down my face. "Of course I did," I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "You're my mother," I said hoarsely. "I know that now." She nodded. "But Glenn—" Her expression hardened. "Glenn failed, Douglas, worse than I ever imagined." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I've been documenting everything. Every time he pressured me to sign papers, every time he grew angry when I pretended to be confused, every time he took something from this room thinking I wouldn't notice. I recorded it all." My chest tightened. "The $280,000, she continued. "I left those accounts accessible on purpose. I wanted to see what he'd do. I've been letting him dig his own grave." I swallowed. "Mom, he told me you were dead. He's planning a funeral for Friday." She nodded slowly. "I know. He told me during our drive today. Said I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully." Her jaw tightened. "He wanted me to sign everything first. When I refused, when I played confused, I could see it in his eyes. He's running out of time." "This is insane," I said. "It's dangerous. We need to call the police right now." "No," she said firmly, "not yet." She met my gaze. "Robert Chen, your lawyer, has been my lawyer too for the past month. We have a plan, but I need you to trust me, Douglas." I squeezed her hand. "Always." Over the next 2 days, we prepared everything. Robert involved the police, but quietly. They agreed to let the plan unfold, to catch Glenn in the act with evidence so solid it couldn't be challenged. Hidden cameras were installed in Mom's room, no bigger than buttons. Trusted nursing home staff were brought in, and Mom continued her performance, confused, fragile, declining, whenever Glenn was near. He came twice more. The first time, he brought documents for her to sign, transfer papers for the house. Mom scribbled something illegible, pretending not to understand. Glenn's frustration bled through his forced smile. "Just sign clearly, Mom," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm trying to help you." The second visit, Thursday night, was worse. He brought a syringe. I watched the footage later and felt physically sick. Glenn told her it was medication. We had it tested afterward. It was a massive dose of sedatives, enough to knock out a horse. Mom pretended to take it, palming the pills instead. "Tomorrow," Glenn said softly, smoothing her hair, "tomorrow you'll finally be at peace. No more suffering." Friday morning arrived. Glenn had booked Thornhill Funeral Home. Notices had been sent, calls had been made. Cousins I hadn't seen in years phoned to offer condolences. I played along. "Yes," I said. 2 p.m. "Yes." Very sudden. The funeral home was packed. Glenn had spared no expense. Flowers everywhere, a large framed photo of Mom from 20 years earlier displayed at the front. He even written an obituary filled with flowery language about a beloved mother who had passed after a long illness. I sat in the front row beside Emma, who had flown in that morning. Across the aisle, Glenn sat with Patricia and their children. His face was composed, suitably sorrowful. Patricia kept touching his arm, comforting him. The kids looked genuinely devastated. They had loved their grandmother. At exactly 2 p.m., Glenn stood and walked to the podium. He adjusted the microphone and began. "We are here today to celebrate the life of Helen Margaret Harrison," he said. "Born February 14, 1939, passed away January 7, 2025. My heart pounded. "My mother was an incredible woman," Glenn continued, "a teacher who shaped young minds for 35 years, a mother who always put her children first, and in her final months she trusted me to care for her." He paused, letting the words settle. "And that's when everything was about to change." "She trusted me," Glenn continued, his voice trembling with emotion I now recognized as pure performance. "To protect her interests, to manage her affairs, to make sure she was comfortable." He paused, pressing a hand to his chest. "My mother always loved me best. She told me so herself. She knew I was the responsible one, the one who would handle everything when the time came. She wanted me to have the house, the cottage, everything she worked her whole life for, because she trusted me to use it wisely, for the family." I stood. Every head in the room turned. "That's interesting, Glenn," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the air. "Care to tell everyone where Mom actually is right now?" A murmur spread through the room. Glenn's face drained of color. "Douglas, sit down," he hissed. "This isn't the time." "Where's the body, Glenn?" I demanded. "Where is Mom's body?" "She's being cremated," he snapped. "We discussed this." "Really?" I said. "Because I called the crematorium. They don't have her." Patricia grabbed his arm. "Glenn, what is he talking about?" Before he could answer, the doors at the back of the funeral home opened. The room went silent. There, framed in the doorway, was my mother. She moved slowly with a walker, but her back was straight, her gaze sharp and unmistakably clear. 2 uniformed police officers followed just behind her. The room exploded. Gasps, cries, someone screaming. People stood. Glenn's daughter burst into tears. Mom walked down the aisle, step by measured step. When she reached Glenn, she stopped and looked directly at him. "Hello, son," she said calmly. "I'm not dead." She paused. "But your inheritance is." Glenn's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. "Mom, you're confused," he stammered. "You're sick. This is a mistake." "I'm not confused, Glenn," she said evenly. "I've been recording everything for the past 8 months. Every threat, every theft, every time you pressured me to sign documents transferring my assets to you, every time you drugged me to keep me compliant." She turned to the room. Many people were crying now, some in relief, others in shock. "I'm sorry for deceiving all of you," she said, "but I had to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he believed I was helpless." Her voice cracked just once. "What I discovered broke my heart." One of the officers stepped forward. "Glenn Harrison," he said, "you are under arrest for elder abuse, theft over $5,000, fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Glenn bolted. He shoved past the officer and ran, 3 steps before he was tackled to the floor and handcuffed. His children were sobbing. Patricia stood frozen, her face drained of all color. As they dragged Glenn toward the exit, he shouted back, "I'm your son! You can't do this to me! I needed that money!" Mom watched him go, tears streaming down her face, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "You were my son," my mother said softly, "but you stopped being my child the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank account." The legal process dragged on for months. At first, Glenn tried to fight the charges, insisting Mom was incompetent and that everything he'd done was for her own good. But the evidence was overwhelming. There was video of him trying to force her to sign transfer documents, audio recordings of threats when she played confused, bank records detailing the stolen money, and testimony from Dr. Whitmore granted immunity, admitting Glenn had pressured him to prescribe unnecessary and dangerous medications. In the end, Glenn pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, ordered to repay the $280,000 he'd stolen, and fined an additional $50,000. His real estate license was permanently revoked. Patricia divorced him and was granted full custody of their children. They were heartbroken, confused, and angry, but Emma and I stayed in their lives as best we could, trying to be the stable presence they suddenly needed. Dr. Whitmore lost his medical license. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario showed no mercy. Knowingly drugging an elderly patient at the request of a power of attorney was something they would not overlook. As for Mom, she sold the big house and moved into a small condo near me. She was done with maintenance, done with possessions. She wanted proximity, not property. We had dinner together twice a week. Emma stayed with her whenever she visited from Vancouver. Mom began volunteering again, this time at an elder abuse prevention center, sharing her story so others could recognize the warning signs before it was too late. With part of the recovered money, we established the Helen Harrison Elder Protection Fund, providing legal aid to seniors facing financial abuse and funding education around power of attorney responsibilities. About a year later, Mom and I sat on my back porch watching snowdrift down over Toronto. She cradled a mug of tea wrapped in a thick blanket. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "The way you tested us?" She was quiet for a long time. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "I regret that my own son was capable of what he did. But I don't regret knowing the truth. I needed to know who would love me when I had nothing left to give." I swallowed hard. "You taught me integrity," I said. "You taught me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "And that's why you passed the test," she said. "Not because you visited me, though that mattered, but because even when you thought I was gone, even when you believed you'd receive nothing, you fought for what was right. You protected me when I couldn't protect myself." She looked at me steadily. "That's what family does, real family. Blood doesn't make you family, Douglas. Love does, choice does, showing up does. Glenn was my blood, but he stopped being family the moment he decided I was just an asset to liquidate." We sat in comfortable silence, watching snow gather on the fence and bare branches. Inside the house, my phone buzzed. Emma calling from Vancouver for our weekly check-in, or maybe Mom's lawyer with updates about the foundation. Life continuing. Mom turned to me, her eyes still sharp, still clear. "You know what the saddest part is?" "What?" "If Glenn had just asked, if he'd been honest about his financial problems, I would have helped him." "Not with everything," she said, "not by enabling bad choices, but I would have helped him." She looked down at her hands. "Instead, he chose to steal. He chose to treat me like I was already dead, and that choice cost him everything." I didn't know how to respond, so I just held her hand. This remarkable woman had taught me more about strength and dignity in the past year than in all the decades before. She survived betrayal by her own son, engineered her own rescue, and emerged not bitter, but determined to protect others from the same fate. That's what real family is. Not blood, not inheritance, not obligation. It's showing up. It's loving someone when they have nothing left to give. It's choosing what's right, even when it means standing against your own brother. Glenn made his choices. He chose greed over love. He chose theft over integrity, and he's paying for it, not just with prison time, but with the loss of his marriage, his career, his children's respect, and his mother's love. As for me, I gained something far more valuable than any inheritance. I gained time, real time with my mother, years where we could talk honestly, laugh freely, and heal together. I gained the certainty that when it mattered most, I did the right thing, and I gained the opportunity to help other families avoid the pain we went through. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. True family protects the vulnerable, and sometimes the bravest thing an 85-year-old woman can do is pretend to be helpless, just long enough to discover who will stand beside her when she truly needs it. That's what I learned from Helen Harrison, my mother, my hero, the woman who taught me that dignity matters more than dollars, and that real love shows up, even when there's nothing to gain.